So since the new year, we've been looking at a sort of strand within Buddhism that began to emerge as something separate around maybe the beginning of the Christian era. A new movement that called itself the Mahayana, the Great Way, or the Great Vehicle, which is the basis, and the Mahayana is the basis of most of the schools of Buddhism that are still around today, with the exception of the Theravada school of Thailand, Sri Lanka and Burma. And we've seen a really important aspect of the Mahayana that we've focused on so far, really, is the fact that it emphasised that after a while our motivation in practicing the Dharma can't just be about liberating ourselves from our negative mental states to become happier, because liberation involves going beyond our concern for ourselves, our concern just for ourselves. And because of that, we can't do it from a concern which is just about ourselves. The motivation would be out of sync with what we're trying to achieve. So our motivation after a while has got to expand. It's got to expand to include others. It's got to expand so that it becomes more about helping us to become more enlightened and not just about me. It has to be about being more use as well as just being more liberated. And we've seen that ideal, that aspect of the Mahayana was encapsulated in, if you like, in what we call the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva being somebody who practices the Dharma, not just for their own sake, but to liberate all beings. They want to get more enlightened to be able to liberate others as well as themselves. But tonight we're going to look at a different aspect to the Mahayana. The way that new movement used myth and symbolism. There's plenty of myth and symbolism in the Pali Canon, but the Mahayana Buddhists, they really took that myth and symbolism and ran with it. And an aspect of the way they did this is in the development, or the discovery, if you like, of a whole range of really powerful archetypal images and figures representing different aspects of enlightenment, which people would meditate on as a way of invoking those qualities in themselves, those potentialities in themselves. So right back to the time of the Buddha, and certainly long before the Mahayana emerged, meditating on the Buddha was a pretty universal practice, a very important practice, as a way of calling enlightened qualities to mind, dwelling on those qualities, allowing them to grow, and waking up our own potential for those qualities. So we looked at that a bit in the intermediate course, you might remember if you've recently finished it. We looked at a number of different archetypal figures. But enlightenment has got loads and loads of facets. It involves wisdom, energy, metta, abundance, and it can be difficult for just one archetype to, as it were, carry all those different qualities, to convey all those different qualities. Just the image of the Buddha, it's quite difficult for that one image to convey all of that. It can be much easier to evoke a quality in, if you like, a simpler figure, a figure that's mainly expressing one particular quality, mainly, if you like. So as time went by, Buddhist practitioners in the Mahayana, in deep meditation, they discovered, if you like, a range of new archetypal figures in the depths of their mind, or maybe in the depths of the deepest levels of mind that we all share, or maybe in the depths of the universe, however you want to think about it. They discovered a range of archetypal figures expressing different aspects of enlightenment, and we're going to talk about three of those figures tonight. And meditating on those figures became an important part of practice for many, many Mahayana Buddhists. And it still is today. Most order members are given such a figure to meditate on at their ordination. And many of us meditate on that every day, or at least chant the mantra of our figure. And the reason this sort of practice became such an important part of Mahayana Buddhism, and is still important today, is because it works. It's empirical, it's powerful, it works. When you're ready for it, it's not maybe, you need a background in other aspects of the Dharma to take it on, but once you're ready for it, it really does work, it's powerful. And these figures, they use imagery, they use symbolism, they use colour, they use mantric sound to evoke deep feelings, deep meanings that can put us in touch with deeply buried potentials in ourselves. In a way that mere words and rational ideas just can't do. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But usually people ask two general questions about these figures, okay, when we introduce these figures. One is, are they real? Are these figures real? Well, it depends what you mean by real. They're obviously not real in quite the way that a chair or a teacup or a dustbin is real. But are chairs and dustbins any more real than metta, or loyalty, or courage, or dignity? Are you and I real? I mean, the Dharma tells us that we don't exist as separate, independent entities, unchanging entities. We don't have any real independent existence. We're completely conditioned by the world around us. So you could say that these figures aren't real, but at the same time they're more real than you and me. And they're certainly more real than teacups. Okay. And second question people ask is, are these figures just imagination, just the product of our own mind? Well, in traditional Mahayana Buddhist countries in the East, people often relate to these figures very much as though they were external forces in the universe, powers outside us that we can tap into. Many of us in the West, many people in the West prefer to think of them as coming from the depths of our minds, as expressions of our deepest potentials. Both ways of thinking have got their advantages and their disadvantages. But ultimately, the Dharma would tell us that neither of those ways of thinking, that they're in us or they're outside us, neither of those ways of thinking is actually completely true or completely untrue. Because ultimately, the duality we create between what's inside and what's outside, our own minds and the world around us, is an artificial one. Ultimately, the two are not different. They're not two. So the Dharma would say, well, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, in a way, but both of them have got advantages and both of them have got different disadvantages. But however we look at those figures, however we want to think about them, the sort of empirical reality is that they work. They work as ways of practicing. They work as meditation. As I've already said, they use imagery, symbolism, colour and mantric sound to evoke deep feelings, deep meanings, deep potentials in us, to awaken deep potentials in us in a way that just words aren't going to do. And I hope maybe we get some idea of how they do that, how they can work as we talk about three of these figures, three figures. So we're going to start off with Bodhinaga talking about Padmasambhava.
So this is a picture of Padmasambhava, which I think most of you will have come across the figure of Padmasambhava on the intermediate course. There's also another painting down here of Padmasambhava. So these are depictions of this figure, this energy, Padmasambhava. I was thinking it's a bit like speed dating this, but we've got 10 minutes to introduce you to each of these figures. And so if I had three words to sum up Padmasambhava, I would say exhilarating. What were the 3 words? Exhilarating, dangerous, alchemist. There would be the 3 words I'd use to sum up Padmasambhava. I don't know if we get any dates out of that, but that's how I sum them up. So I've got 3 different angles I want to draw on just quickly in these 10 minutes to just give you a flavour of the qualities that Padmasambhava represents. So the first one, exhilarating. And for me, Padmasambhava really what he captures, what he encapsulates is the energy of transformation. Padmasambhava is all about transformation and the aspect of enlightenment and Buddhahood that is to do with transformation. So that's what I'm going to draw out anyway. There's more to him than that, but I'm going to draw out this quality of transformation. So there's a couple of, you'll notice there's lots of rich symbolism around the figure of Padmasambhava, but there's 2 to draw out. One is he's holding in his hand, in his left hand, a skull cup. So a cup made out of a skull. He's also got in the crook of his left arm kind of a magician staff, an alchemist staff, which is called a Katbanga. It looks a bit like this, which I found in the shrine cupboard. And what you'll notice on this Katbanga, it's not an ordinary magician's staff. He's got 3 severed heads on his Katbanga. There's basically, freshly severed head, a kind of decaying, rotting head, and a skull. So it's pretty gruesome. What I was thinking, reflecting on this, and what it says to me is, well, this is kind of me. This is me as I am now. This is me in the present moment. The kind of freshly severed head is me in the present moment. And then you've got the decaying head, which is kind of me, maybe at the point of death, that I'm going to die. And then you've got the skull, which is me, long forgotten, actually, just in the past. Just somebody who used to be alive and has long since been forgotten. And so in Buddhism, and particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, but in Buddhism we reflect on death quite a lot. We reflect on impermanence. We reflect on the fact that everything is impermanent, including me. And we're going to die, I'm going to die. It's not something we like to talk about usually or think about, but as Buddhists we try and reflect on this. And Padmasambhava, with the symbolism of the skull, cup, and these kind of severed heads, really gets that message across very, very strongly. Let's look at this. Be careful. It's quite poignant. We had a festival to do with death on Sunday, Parinirvana Day, and there's quite a poignant part of that festival where the names of people from the Sangha were read out, relatives, friends of the Sangha, order members who died in the past year. And it was a very, very long list actually. It went on for quite some time, just this list of more and more people that were close to people in the Sangha who passed away in the last year. What really kind of came home to me was just the reality of death, the truth of death actually, that I don't know when I'm going to die. It could be a long time from now. I hope it's a long time from now. But actually it might not be. It could be next week, it could be tomorrow. I don't know. Something I'm not in control of is when I'm going to die. So Buddhism really encourages us to reflect on impermanence and death, not kind of out of some morbid reason, but actually because it stimulates a sense of urgency. That we need to act now. There's no point delaying transformation, progress, spiritual practice to some time in the future when it seems like a good idea. Actually, we need to do it now. We need to practice now. Because we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to change. So Padmasambhava for me really kind of is an embodiment of this quality of urgency that's associated with Padmasambhava. He wants, you could say it's the aspect of our higher self or a force in the universe, whichever you want to look at it, that wants us to wake up and wants us to wake up urgently and not to delay, because in a way, there's only the present moment. We can only act in the present moment. The future is just an idea. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. So there's that element of Padmasambhava with a sense of urgency. There's also the quality of transformation to do with his Vajra mudra. So I've got these 2 implements here. So you see Padmasambhava's right hand is holding a Vajra, this implement, the Vajra, in a demon subduing mudra. So you get the energy of Padmasambhava is an energy of transformation, but Buddhism isn't just about transforming our intellect and our ideas, because it's quite easy to change our ideas and to kind of change what we think about, to kind of go along with new ideas, but it's actually quite difficult to act alongside them, to walk the talk. So what we need to do is to transform, you could say, our deeper, murkier bits, the kind of our emotions, our deeper energies, our kind of deeply ingrained habits that take some changing actually. So this is an element of Padmasambhava I feel like I really need, I need to connect with, is the element of transfer. Well, it's described as transforming the depth, transforming demons, and this is the demon subduing mudra that he holds, this implement, the Vajra, a bit like this, the demon subduing mudra. And on this painting here, it's actually shown quite kindly, quite kind of compassionately, just subduing a demon. And what Padmasambhava is said to do is, there's different representations of Padmasambhava, but in one of the representations he holds a demon dagger, a purba, and he uses it just to pin down or to kind of just in a way, to pin down the demon and have a good look at it. And so this is a symbol for how we can use our awareness really to pin down these our inner demons, our kind of murkier bits. We can use our awareness just to become more aware of how our minds work, our patterns, our habits, and then we can name them. And once we've named them, they no longer have a power over us. So Padmasambhava is able to pin down demons and name them, give them their true name. So basically what this says is that when we're practicing the Dharma, we get to learn about ourselves. It's when you really commit to trying to practice something, you get to learn about yourself. You get to learn about all the different sides of yourself, and there's bits of yourself you'll encounter that you will need to transform and you'll need to change. And Padmasambhava represents the energy that we need to do that, to kind of meet those energies and to transform them. So he holds the Vajra and the demon subduing mudra. So he's exhilarating. Padmasambhava is exhilarating. You could say he's dangerous as well. He's wild. He's a dangerous, wild figure. So maybe perhaps not what you'd associate with Enlightenment or the Buddha, or perhaps we think of Buddhists, archetypally maybe we think of Buddhists as being very peaceful, very calm, very kind of softly spoken. But Padmasambhava subdues demons. He holds a Vajra. He's got a flaming sword with severed heads on it, a flaming trident with severed heads on it. So you could say he's quite a dangerous figure. He represents a kind of a dangerous energy, a threatening energy almost. So there's lots and lots of myths and legends and stories associated with Padmasambhava, but he's got this dangerous quality to him. He was unconventional. He's based on a historical figure. Padmasambhava was said to have brought Buddhism to Tibet. I think about 800 in the Common Era. But some of the myths, some of the legends say that he meditated in cremation grounds. So he deliberately went into dangerous places, scary, terrifying places, and he went and he meditated there in a way to face the fears, to face the kind of the fears and the dangers. He would deliberately go into these dangerous places and meditate there. And that's what we need to do in our Buddhist practice. Actually, sometimes our practice will take us into uncomfortable territory. If we're going to change and we're going to transform, we need to go sometimes into places that feel dangerous. Maybe it might just be an encounter with somebody that feels a bit outside of our comfort zone, a communication that we need to have that feels outside of our comfort zone. Maybe we spot a way that we're going to need to change, or something we're going to need to let go of that's causing us harm. And that can feel dangerous, that can feel threatening. So Padmasambhava again represents this part of transformation which can feel dangerous, and the kind of courage, the bravery to just go into those dangerous places and to be transformed, to allow ourselves to be transformed. And there's an element of death around that which we call spiritual death, because for something new to emerge, us as we are now has to die, has to drop away. The habits that we have now which are causing us harm have to drop away. They have to die for new, more positive qualities to emerge. So this element of death, it's not just our own physical death. Actually, we use the term spiritual death to represent this quality of transformation where we need to allow us as we are now to die for something very, very radically different to emerge. So, is that 10 minutes? Okay, good. So to round up really, Padmasambhava represents this quality of transformation, almost like the urge within us to transform, the urge within the universe to transform, to grow and develop. And he wants, it's the energy that wants us to do this urgently, because there's no time to waste. And it involves a transformation of all of us, not just our thoughts and our thinking, but our deeper emotions and volitions and drives. And that can feel dangerous, that can feel threatening and scary. So just in a way, you might wish to encounter Padmasambhava, but be careful what you wish for, because I'm quite, I'm a little, I'm scared of the figure represented by Padmasambhava does feel dangerous and sometimes scary. But he's one thing to say, just to finish, is he wears the cloak of the Bodhisattva. He wears the cloak of metta and compassion. So the way that Padmasambhava does this, goes about this transformation is through kindness and compassion. So it can feel, I suppose, this side of change, this side of who we're going to become in the future, it can feel threatening. But actually, once we have changed and we become something different, we can see actually, it wasn't that much to be. It wasn't something to be too frightened or scared about. But this side of transformation, it can feel dangerous and scary. Padmasambhava represents that.
So I'm going to talk about a figure who, if she went speed dating, would get all the dates, I think. So it's the beloved, the Green Tara. And this is a very traditional figure of her, a picture of her up here, which is complicated, I think. I think these kind of quite traditional ones, of Green Tara in particular, I've been having quite a good look. But there's so much going on, it's hard to see what's happening. So I've got a more modern picture as well. But that feels a bit kind of not quite right to me as well. So I just have, if any of you are artists and you connect with Green Tara, please do some pictures of her, because we really need some really good pictures of her. So I think the picture I'll have up for the talk is the next one. This is just to give a sense of her compassion, her kindness. So I suppose the essence of Green Tara is that she is full of compassion, and she can rescue us from our fear and anxiety. The fear and anxiety we create for ourselves. So one myth about Tara, and actually Tara is one of the most beloved figures, I suppose, in the Buddhist world. She's very beloved in Tibet in particular. She's very much kind of quite a folk figure as well. She'll be called on by people very often, Tara. I think she's got a certain kind of, she's easy for us to connect with. If Padmasambhava has a certain fierceness, you're a bit scared of him, I think Green Tara's the opposite. She's very approachable. So that one of the myths about where she comes from is that she's born from the tears of a figure called Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara was looking down at the suffering of all beings, the endless suffering of all beings as he saw it. And he'd worked for many years, many eons, many millions of years to try and overcome that, and he really hadn't got very far. And because he saw this endless suffering that we cause ourselves, really, the way that there's so much anger and fear and despair in the world, and he started to cry tears, and he cried so many tears they formed a great big lake. And out of this lake there arose this beautiful figure, this female figure, this graceful figure of Tara. So she's born from tears. And what she represents is an active force in the world, an active force of compassion. She loves us when things are hard. And I think it's important that, because as well as her softness and her gentleness, which I think is very much part of her, she's very much an active figure. Her name means saviouress. She's a saviour. So she's got, particularly on this picture back here actually, if you can see this, she's often portrayed with one leg like this coming into the world. So she sits in meditation posture, but her front leg is going into the world. And that's very much to represent that she's very approachable for us. We can call on her, and whatever that means to you, and she will come. She's active in the world. She's very good with our just mundane fears. So in Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, she's seen as the being you'd call on if you're being attacked by animals or bandits. So, just very mundane things. And I think she's very good for Westerners as well, actually, because we can so much suffer from anxiety, from fear. We can feel that, we can live in this kind of neurotic world of anxiety, I think. And I'm just going to read a few lines from a ritual, a puja, which is written by somebody called Bodhisattva, who's an order member in our movement. And it's in a section of the puja which is called the confession, which is where we let go of things that get in the way. And I think this sums up very beautifully some of the fears we can suffer from. So it's, keep tripping over the buttons. I'm sure that means something, I don't know what, but... So it's a confession to Tara, and it's, before you I confess to all the commonplace worries and anxieties that fill my day, so that I rarely take an easy breath. The fear that stops me trying, the fear that creates a facade, the fear of being with others, the fear of being alone, the fear that makes me harsh, tight and unkind, the fear of not getting what I want, that makes me grabbing and self-concerned. Before you I confess the deep fears, fear of madness, fear of death, fear of life, fear of anything beyond the tortoise shell of my own ego. So those are the kind of fears that I think all of us experience deep down. And for me, when I first came across that confession section in that puja, it was beautiful because I felt like those fears that so dominate my life were put into a very articulated very well in a way I hadn't kind of articulated to myself. So how does Green Tara help us? How does she help us? I suppose she helps us with her compassion, her love. So she can see that element within us, I suppose, or that element in the universe, kind of be with those fears, acknowledge those fears, and give us love and metta when we're experiencing those fears. She's also very wise, so her wisdom, that she sees the reality of things. She sees that so much of our suffering comes from our own greed, our own hatred, our own ignorance. But most of all, I think it's her playfulness. And I think her playfulness is very much expressed in her gracefulness, her gentleness. And my experience is that when somebody's playful, it kind of cuts through my anxiety quite often. So if I'm feeling all a bit kind of anxious about something, and someone can kind of just lift me with a bit of playfulness, I can just really see through it. So I think the compassion of Tara is expressed in playfulness. So I suppose I just finish by saying that actually, as well as us seeing Tara as being out there, we ourselves can become Tara. So we can acknowledge our own fears, have compassion for our own fears, and those of others as well. And we can become full of compassion for ourselves and other beings.
So to round off, I'd like to introduce you to Manjushri, or Manjughosha, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. You got him. He's got a funny green colour. He shouldn't be green. Anyway, Manjushri, that fount of all knowledge, Wikipedia, describes him as the oldest and most important of the Mahayana archetypal figures. And he actually crops up all over the Mahayana world, not just in Tibet, like Padmasambhava and Tara, but you'll find him in China riding his lion, and you'll find him in Zen monasteries in Japan, all over the Mahayana world. Anyway, the name Manjushri means something like gentle glory or soft glory. Manju means gentle, soft. Manjughosha means gentle-voiced or soft-voiced. And I think that's a really apt name because the voice of wisdom speaks to us in a very quiet voice. We have to be quiet to hear it. We have to calm all that usual chatter that's going on in order to be able to hear the voice of wisdom, to let Manjughosha speak to us. So Manjughosha is usually depicted as a handsome, well-built young man in the prime of life, sitting with great poise, cross-legged on a blue lotus. And like all these figures, his body is made of light. Imagine him made of light. And it's not a heavy body of flesh and blood like ours. So he's made of light, and his colour is never like that, but he can vary from a sort of orange, a sort of warm reddish orange through gold to saffron yellow. Basically, I see him as the colour of sunlight. He's the colour of sunlight, or he's sometimes described as looking like the colour of sunlight reflected in a lion's eye. The lion is his animal. So sunlight reflected in a lion's eye. So he's made of light, and he sort of shimmers. He moves constantly in motion, like a beautifully coloured silk tent moving in the breeze. He dances. His whole figure expresses both stillness and this beautiful movement. And above his head, he holds a flaming sword. He holds a flaming sword, a sword with beautiful blue flames running along its edges. And he holds this sword delicately. He's holding it delicately. Not like a machete, he's going to go out and cut the garden with. He's holding it delicately with great poise. Always still, but always in the process of cutting off all our deluded ideas. All the deluded ideas that keep us stuck and trapped in an old way of being. And he doesn't have to use any effort to do this. He doesn't have to do any effort to do his cutting. Because his sword is said to be so sharp that if you allowed a piece of silk, if you took a really light piece of silk and just let it settle, you held his sword, the silk would just part around the sword and fall down in two pieces. The sword wouldn't disturb the silk at all. It just parted. So it's an incredibly subtle and delicate sword. He's often shown, as well as the sword, he's often shown holding a book to his heart. This is the real book of the perfection of wisdom. It's the book. Okay? It's the archetypal book, the book of all books. And it's the book that describes wisdom that cannot be communicated in crude human words. I always imagine it as a highly illuminated book, but it's a book that communicates a wisdom that's beyond our words, beyond our crude words. It's as though it's written in a higher language. It's written in a language from another dimension. It's written in a language from a higher realm of reality. And that's what he holds to his heart. That's what he comes back to. So he's got blue-black hair, tied up, simply tied up in 5 knots. Across there. And he's dressed in beautifully shimmering blue silks that move gently in the breeze of this higher realm that he inhabits. And he wears a crown of jewels, brightly coloured jewels, golden bracelets, anklets, necklaces. And they're all made of light, like him. They're all made of light. They've been crafted by craftsmen who work in light. So he's beautiful. One of his characteristics is beauty. And finally, he sports bunches of blue lotuses stuck behind his ears. Which I think is a telling touch, actually. I'll come back to that. His whole figure is surrounded by an aura of light. And this aura is composed of slowly moving fine lines of golden light against a blue background. That's how it comes across there. The colours seem to be very odd. Anyway, slowly moving lines, golden lines, which I always see as being like, if you go paddling in shallow, clear water and the sun's shining, you see all these patterns that the ripples make in the sand. Golden threads, golden networks, moving in this beautiful manner. That's how his aura is. It's these lines of light just gently moving against this blue background, like sunshine on water. So, what to say about Manjushri is ancient. He's the oldest of the archetypal figures, but he's always young, he's always fresh. His sword cuts away all the stories that we tell about the world that make us old, that trap us in stale, limiting, boring versions of the world and versions of ourselves. So he cuts away all those phony ideals, all those stodgy ideas, all those conventional ideas, all the ideas we use to try and package up the universe into tidy parcels we can get hold of and understand. And he cuts away all the silly seriousness about things that don't matter. That's what his sword does. He cuts all these away so that we can see and live in the marvellous, beautiful universe of glittering quicksilver change. The real universe that's always fresh, always new. It's a universe of dancing beauty. It's always young. It's like the golden lines of his aura. A dancing universe, like sunshine on water. That's the universe of shunyata, of emptiness, that's described in his book. But it's an emptiness that's just full of beauty and positive qualities. So when I visualise Manjushri, what he often invokes in me is above all a sense of freedom, a sense of vast expansiveness, a sense of delight, and a sense of playfulness again, a bit like Tara. So freedom, vast expansiveness, delight and playfulness. I think the lotuses behind his ears give the game away, actually. Surata, who, like me, practices Manjughosha's sadhana, his meditation, once said to me, he described him as a wide boy. Surata comes from the east end of London. He said Manjughosha's a wide boy. And I think, yeah, he isn't bound by the silly seriousness of the conventionally minded, okay? He isn't bounded by that. He dances in reality. He encourages us to live in what's called lila, the play of the Bodhisattva. We might work for the benefit of all, but it isn't work. It's play. We do it as play. It doesn't have that silly, stodgy seriousness about it. But this isn't sort of irresponsible, selfish playfulness, because as well as wisdom, Manjushri is the embodiment of metta and compassion. Metta and wisdom, compassion and wisdom, they can't be separated. They can't be separated. You can't really have one without the other. So Manjushri, Manjughosha, is described in the meditations as loving all beings like an only child. You address him, "O thou who in kindness, as though to an only child, to living beings." He loves all living beings like an only child. He's standing close to everybody, so close there's no separation. Desperate to be able to whisper his wisdom into their ear. If only they would shut up. If only they would shut up that stupid, prattling mind of theirs. He would whisper his wisdom into our ears with his 64-fold voice and all its harmonies. So he stands close to everybody, wanting, when he wants desperately, more than anything else, is to get some of that liberating wisdom through to us. What he wants to do is free us from the mind-made bonds we've made for ourselves that trap us in a grey, boring existence, that trap us in suffering. There's a lovely Bruce Springsteen song, isn't there? One frightened man and some shadows for bars. We live in a prison with shadows for bars. We've invented them. Or Blake, he talks about the mind-forged manacles. We live in mind-forged manacles. That's what stops us. It's the manacles we forge for ourselves with our minds. And that's what Manjushri's sword cuts. So he's about freedom. And this freedom is, it's communicated by his image, it's communicated, if you imagine him, by his whole being, if you like. But it's also communicated through his mantra. His mantra is Om Marapachanadi. And I'm not going to, we haven't got a lot of time, or perhaps we haven't got a lot of time. Arapachana, if you like, is the syllables of the wonderful alphabet that his book is written in. It's the alphabet of a higher dimension of reality. But D is the last syllable, T, D-H-I, is his seed syllable, which is, if you like, the quintessential sound symbol of Manjughosha, which sums up his existence in a single sound symbol. It's the essence of it expresses the essence of his being. And when you imagine him, when you visualize him, you see that syllable throbbing in the center of his heart in gold, in reddish gold. So a mantra, all these figures have their own mantras, and you will have heard the mantras of probably all these figures if you've been coming along for a while. A mantra is the sound symbol of an archetypal bodhisattva, or Buddha. And sound can be symbolic in exactly the same way that colour can. I mean, all these figures carry their own colour, and the colour communicates something. The bright, brilliant, dancing yellow of Manjughosha communicates something. The beautiful green of Tara does. These colours communicate something. And in the same way, sound can communicate something at quite a deep level. They say something. Sound can say something to our deeper mind. And our words often use this quality of sound. So our words, the words we use in our language, they often use the quality of sound to help them express something. And poets are good at doing that. But the meaning of the word doesn't sort of exhaust the symbolic meaning of the sound, if you like. What the sound conveys, it can't completely capture what the sound conveys. So the sound ti, to me, it conveys expansiveness and release. It rhymes with free. The word free uses the same sound to express the thing, but it's the other way around. T, the symbol, is the sound, the very sound itself. Free works because it uses that sound symbol. So D, free, release, freedom. And that's all conveyed by that sound symbol. If you do the practice, you say Om, which actually means reality, if you like, and then Arapachana, these syllables of the magic alphabet of the other dimension, higher dimension. You see those coming into you, and finally D, release, freedom. Freedom, hey, great. So the sound, yeah, that's what the sound D communicates. So that's a bit about Manjushri. If what I've said appeals to you, then I'd invite you to try something in your meditation. You might want to do it after the break. I'd invite you to try something in your meditation. Say you're doing the mindfulness of breathing. Maybe imagine Manjushri with his sword hovering somewhere just a bit above your line of sight. Okay? Just imagine it there. Now, you don't have to see him like in all the detail and brilliantly clearly. A vague idea will do. A vague idea will do very well. But imagine Manjushri there, and whenever a stale thought comes up, whenever a negative, limiting old thought comes up, whenever an angry thought or whatever sort of thought it is, a blaming thought, let Manjushri's sword just go whoosh and cut it off. Let Manjushri's sword just liberate it into the blue emptiness of Shunyata. Let his sword just cut it off and turn it into the dancing playfulness of reality.